I've always been drawn to stories of journeys. As a child, I was completely captivated by the Little House on the Prairie books. I was before the TV series, and I'm a little purist about this. I like the books. Laura Ingalls Wilder family picked up again and again as they were on their way in this westward movement into the unknown. And my favorite parts of the story weren't the parts of the settling. My favorite parts were always the parts about the journey, loading up the wagon and setting off and not knowing what one would discover one day to the next. My own family's story on my mother's side actually parallels that of the Ingalls. My family went from Maine to Vermont to Wisconsin and finally to South Dakota, following that same westward path and settling in the teeny town of Millette, which was just north of where the Ingalls settled. Then when we moved and lived in Japan for a while, I met people in this modern world who in effect had made some similar choices. They had left their homelands and sometimes went for years without seeing parents or siblings who were here in the United States while they built a life in Japan, having to adopt a new culture, learn a new language, and sort out what parts of their own culture to hold on to and to express, and what to let go of, what parts of themselves to bring along, and which to leave behind. I was fascinated by those of my neighbors who had been in Japan for so long that they told stories of not being able to find peanut butter, which by the time we got there, we could find peanut butter. Stories of pilgrimage are part of the congregational heritage as well through our New England forebears. Think about those first pilgrims who came across the ocean with no promise of returning ever, never knowing if they would see their families again. Or think about the pioneers who moved from the relatively settled parts of New England off to the Western Reserve, and those who braved the deserts and the mountains with no guarantee of anything except for hardship. Think about the disciples who were asked to follow Jesus without knowing where that would lead. The Pilgrim Way is not just about geography. It is also about the courage to let go and be reshaped. Jeremiah tells us that in God's hands we are like clay. Our substance is somehow the same, but the shape gets transformed into something new. And to be sure, Jesus' followers were being reshaped, letting go of some of the security and old habits while they stepped into a brand new life. This passage from Luke is instructions to those who would follow in the Pilgrim Way that Jesus creates for us. It also is about planning enough ahead, but also carrying one's cross into the future, letting go of old connections to be reshaped and reformed in God's hands. Now, for those of us who have been on this journey of faith for a long time, it may feel to us like the work is already done. Haven't we already been formed? Haven't we already proven ourselves by following? But God God is not finished with us yet. Sometimes the Spirit surprises us, and we might find ourselves moving out in a pilgrim way in some new direction, trying on something different. It may be that we finally let go of a long-held resentment, or perhaps we suddenly are engaged in Scripture in a new way with great curiosity. Perhaps we dare to take some leadership in the church that we didn't want to ever before. It's inconvenient and time-consuming, but something calls us to do it. Perhaps we may discover compassion where before we found judgment. Perhaps we are moved to new levels of generosity, surprising even ourselves. Perhaps we are suddenly called into a role of advocacy where once we left that to others. The Pilgrim Way is certainly not a once and done. It is rather a lifetime invitation to let our hearts be shifted and reshaped in God's hands, to repattern our time, our choices, our footsteps to follow Christ. So as we begin this new program season again at South Church, I invite all of us to see ourselves anew as pilgrims. And before us is communion. This is food for our journey. At this table, we receive Christ's presence. We are reknit together as companions on the journey, and we have a foretaste of the journey's end, the banquet at which we will all be reunited, God's beloved community gathered in joy. So, beloved pilgrims, let us hear God's voice calling us into something new. Let us be reshaped in God's hands, and let us walk in his way together.